Well, I wish I had the answer, so I think Anna's.
You already said that. The young people, the enemy.
Right. Look, the Israeli Jewish population, I believe, wants peace. You know, 70% of Israeli Jews supported the Oslo peace process. Even though it didn't succeed, nevertheless, that was the idea. And Israelis have never accepted the settlements. And that whole, the Sharon and Begin and Netanyahu and all these people have pursued, that's never been really accepted by most Israelis. But, you know, fear is a very effective way to manipulate people. So, all Israeli leaders, and you have to remember that in Israel, most of the leaders, the political leaders, are military people. You see, so when they speak, they have an authority that's more than just a normal politician. You know, when Ehud Barak speaks, the head of the Labour Party, which is supposed to be the left, it's as left as your SPD party is. You know, when Barak speaks, he was the chief of staff of the Israeli army. He's the most decorated soldier in the history of the Israeli army. He is still the defense minister. He was the prime minister. If he says, and this is what he says every day, there is no political solution. He's the one that I think introduces hopelessness to this whole thing. Because what Barak says is, the Arabs are our permanent enemies. They don't want peace. They'll never accept us. I unmasked Arafat as the terrorist he really is at Camp David. And this is what Israelis hear. Well, if Ehud Barak, the heroic general, says this, who am I to disagree? So Israelis, even though they want peace, have internalized this idea that we want peace, but the Arabs won't let us, you see? And what it does, of course, is it also removes all responsibility from us. So that's the problem, and sometimes I think you get to a situation, I'm very pissed off at the Israeli public, because I think they're being very irresponsible. But still, sometimes that happens. I think, if I could say this about South Africa, the whites of South Africa, the white population, the Europeans, were living with apartheid. Some liked it, some didn't like it, but they were living with it, and they could have lived with it for another 100 years. The South African Europeans would not have risen up by themselves to overthrow the apartheid regime. But when de Klerk finally came, largely because of external pressures, but also internal, when de Klerk came and said to them, apartheid is over. Okay, even the Afrikaners went along with it, and there was a transition. Much more smooth, with all the problems, much more smooth than anybody could have predicted. And I think that's true of Israel. I think that if the international community says to Israel, we will guarantee your security. Okay? Israel, you can be a member of NATO if you want to be. In other words, that's what Israeli Jews are worried about, is security. So if that security can be ensured, and then the international community says, Israel, the occupation is over, period. We're going to give you 2, 3, 4 years. You get all the settlers out, and this is going to become a Palestinian state. I think you would have dancing in the streets of Tel Aviv. That's exactly what the Israeli Jews want, but they don't feel they can do it themselves. They've been disempowered, partly by the idea that, again, that the Arabs are our permanent enemies, but also by the fact that we have a crazy government and system, you know, and we've got 10 parties in the government and you can't get a coherent policy. So that's why I'm here. We do international advocacy because there's nothing to say to the Israeli public, unfortunately. They believe that they can't make peace. And so we have to create international pressures that will then pressure Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories, or, something we can talk about after, or if not, then we have to create support for a one-state solution, a binational state, which I think is something that's difficult to do, but in a way that's the reality that Israel has left us. But it's going to, and it's not fair, but in a way the responsibility lies with you and with other people in the international community that will have to pressure Israel from the outside, just like was done, I think, on apartheid South Africa.
We had one more question here, and then there may be more, but then I'll go to the other side. So, please.
First, I want to thank you all for your brilliant speeches, and I have a question to Professor Falk. Since you are from the United Nations and I'm a student of political science, and I took part in several national model United Nations, but recently I kind of give up hope about especially the refugee problem, because I read that the UNRWA educated the refugees, so more and more emigrate, and there's another policy in the United States that students who apply for a master don't get a visa, Palestinian students, but if they want to get a green card, all of the family, it's kind of partnership maybe between, I don't know, the United States and Israel to get more and more people, Palestinians, out of the territory. So, you have less Palestinians you have to deal with, and I wanted to ask you what you know about that. Thank you.
Happily, I can give a very short answer because I know almost nothing about it. I wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying is correct, but I just have no relevant information. And so I think we should take other questions within the limits